Hey, welcome to Gary's Shortlist podcast. Today's a ripper, so stay tuned. We're catching up with Stuart Harrison. Stuart Harrison is from Leadership Horsepower. Yes, Leadership Horsepower. Stuart uses horses in his equine program to facilitate leadership courses for all people, different shapes and sizes. Stick around, this is a ripper. Cheers. G'day, Stu. Thanks for joining us here at the podcast today at Gary's Shortlist. I really appreciate your time. It's fantastic to see your face yet again. I know you're on the Sunshine Coast there, and I'm based in Sydney, and so this was an obvious way to do it. Otherwise, we'll keep talking about this. But welcome, Stu.
Thank you very much, Gary. I'm honoured to be invited on board for this podcast. It's been a long time, really, since we've been together. So many years now. I can't remember, about 15, 16, maybe even more. But before both of us were wearing glasses, I'd say.
And I was a little darker in the hair, perhaps. But, mate, it's fantastic to have you on board. And look, I guess the reason I was really, really excited to get you to come and have a chat on the podcast was I vividly recall being very much influenced by the leadership coaching and training that you provided to the organisation that we both worked in back in the day. It was a fantastic experience. I still tap into it, believe it or not. I still tap into particularly some of the basics around leadership. It's my recollection was leadership was a very, very big buzzword with a lot of snake oil out there at the time. And when I connected with you, thankfully I found someone that I could communicate really, really well with. And obviously got a lot out of the training and courses. But perhaps, Stu, you tell us a little bit about your background. And one background I don't know a lot about is your military background back in the UK.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Well, that's a lifetime ago now. I mean, sometimes I reflect on it. It's 30 odd years ago. But I think essentially that was where my professional career began. And also my leadership journey, where I went into the Royal Marines Commando, one of the elite forces in UK. Very stringent sort of tests to get in. We actually had, at that time, we had 70% attrition rate. So only 30% of people were getting through. And I know they've changed training now to change that, which is a good thing. But essentially in there, I spent a couple of years in a unit in 4-5 Commando in Scotland. And then I got seconded to an anti-terrorist group that was attached to the Special Forces, so the Special Boat Service. And again, sort of just upped my skills, upped my realisation about performance. So two sides of things here is performance and leadership, and how leadership can be an enabler of performance, or it can be a diminisher of performance. So I was very fortunate to have that start to my sort of professional career.
Wow, terrific. And then you came out to beautiful Australia. When was that?
1992. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and again, with Australia, I saw it as a new frontier. I'd been sort of all over Europe and, been to the US a couple of times and Norway, and I had an auntie out here actually who at a very young age, she came out to UK and planted the seed for me, this mystical land down under.
Yeah.
And when I landed here, I just, I thought I'd landed in paradise. And I still think that, I mean, here on the Sunshine Coast, and we're very lucky, especially with global events as they are now. We're pretty protected and we've got a beautiful country.
Absolutely, we do. So your foray into, I guess, the professional leadership services that you got involved with back in the day, and very interestingly, the equine program. Perhaps you can. I'm sure that was something that really resonated with me, and in fact, I'm now the proud owner of too many horses that I wish to mention, but and I think you were very, very responsible for a lot of that. But yeah. Mate, I know the listeners will be very keen to hear about the correlation between horses and your equine leadership program. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Gaz. So essentially, you know, I actually achieved sort of a bit of a dream by getting on the America's Cup and being the team development coach and the fitness coach. So it was a dual role. And I realized then that it was all about leadership, that the real enabler is leadership. And if the leadership wasn't aligned, then it sort of diminishes the ability to perform, because most people, or all of us, have potential within us. And really good leaders have an uncanny knack to tap into that. So when I came back to Australia, I was very fortunate to get in with a consulting firm that were really my mentors in getting me into a consulting position and teaching me and mentoring and coaching me all the way through. And I've still got the same mentor, a guy called Rob Metcalf, who I spoke to last night. He's back in the UK, and we still catch up regularly. So mentoring is very important to that. On my journey with Rob and his company, you know, the principle is there's two sides to leadership. There's the doing side, where we've got to get stuff done. We've got to be good planners. We've got to set certain conditions. We've got to be good at logistics, or we've got to know how to get logistics done, etc. And we've got to do some task work. But the other side to leadership is the being side. And this was the one that I really resonated with. It was about building trusting relationships, about knowing yourself and knowing others. And it's what they call emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence was quite a big, well, it was small at the time. It was a new catchphrase when I sort of met you. And of course, in the construction and mining industry, which I worked in both, it was seen with a bit of cynicism, let's say, you know, and trepidation. But
it's
actually, yeah. But when we talked about it, and you now look at construction, it's amazing. I love what's going on in construction and the mining industry. You know, you've got men for mental health, and you've got your mates in there that you can go and talk to. It's brilliant. And we've achieved really good things within both industries. I think we've made a lot of headway. This concept of emotional intelligence really intrigued me. And it's really around sort of noticing and addressing the human needs within yourself and in other people. And, you know, being tuned into that. Whereas if we're just focused on task work, we can miss a lot of information. So let's say, I mean, last night, this is the truth. My 6-year-old daughter wakes up at 3 o'clock. She's been having, you know, awkward sleeps for about a week now. And, you know, 3 o'clock in the morning, she comes into our bed. And of course, we've got broken sleep. So if you were leading me and I walked into the office, you kind of see these bags under my eyes. I'd be probably a bit lower on energy than I usually am. And if you're emotionally intelligent, you would pick up on that. And you'd say, hey, Stu, you're looking a bit tired today. What's going on? And, you know, I've had no sleep and I didn't get to the gym this morning because I was actually overtired. And you'd say, righto, mate, well, look. And you'd manage me from there.
Yeah.
And that, you know, that's really what it's about, because what that does is engender trust between the two of us. Now, if you're task focused and you just sort of didn't take any notice of that and said, Stu, I want you to get these things done. You're running late on, you know, these projects. I want these tasks done. And you hadn't checked in with me. What that does in the brain, it triggers a bit of a threat response. Now, how did all of this lead to equine assisted learning? Well, back in the day, and it would have been, you know, 15, 20 years ago, the emotional intelligence, I was really intrigued about it all. And I was living in the spot at Randwick there in Sydney.
Terrific spot.
Brilliant spot, right? And right next to the cinema. Do you remember there was a second-hand bookstore right next to the cinema in the spot? Anyway, beautiful little bookshop. And of course, I was always curious. And I walked in there, thousands of books, and this one book stood out to me. And it was called It's Not About the Horse. And it was a book written by a guy called Wyatt Webb. And he was an ex-country and western singer, got into drugs and alcohol addiction, all of these things. His life fell apart. But his way back was through therapy and through using horses with therapy. And as I read the book, so I bought the book for $2. I read the book in a day and a half. I could not put it down because everything that he was explaining and describing to me was emotional intelligence.
Right.
And I just went, wow, I've got to do this. Yeah. I've got to get qualified. I'm going to be a pioneer in equine assisted learning in Australia. And so I flew off to Colorado Springs and got qualified as an equine assisted learning specialist. And I came back, and with the construction company that we both were working with, me as a consultant and you as an employee, I presented it to the CEO at the time, James Kell. And as you know, you've had James Kell on. He was a real innovative character. So if you presented the facts and the data to him and painted the picture of what you could get out of it, he was willing to sort of take a risk there. When I explained it to him, he just kind of was blown away. He said, wow, we got to do this. And you were on that program, which was our pilot sort of, senior leadership program that we were doing. And it was just amazing. We flew everybody up to Tamworth there, which was an experience in itself. But the point is with horses, they give you authentic, immediate feedback on what you're feeling and how you're dealing with your emotions. And when you want to develop emotional intelligence, you've actually got to develop the emotional side of the brain, which is sort of in the limbic system there. And means you've got to feel things and you've got to do something with those feelings in the moment. Now, we do a lot of theoretical side to emotional intelligence, and it's good knowledge, but you don't learn until you actually do experiential side to it.
Absolutely. My recollection when we were doing the equine program was there was like a round yard, and I can't remember what sort of horse it was, but it was a very scary horse in this round yard. And the task was, I think there was probably 10 of us in the group, and each one of us had to approach the round yard, open the gate, walk in, and the objective was to finally get to this horse that's just flying around this round yard, to calm down, get your hand on the horse to pat it, and then ultimately get the halter on. And when you saw this horse running around, you just thought, this is a disaster in the waiting. And it was the point I'd really like to make is it was really interesting to watch every different person approach it differently. And, from the way that you approached the gate to the way you tried to get this horse to calm down, and this horse hadn't been handled. So it was a real test. Some did really well, some did really poorly. I can't even remember what happened with me, but it was really interesting. You do. All right.
Yeah.
How did I go?
Sensational, Gary.
I can't remember because I've spent so much time with horses ever since. But I guess to go back to your point, to understand the way you interact with a horse and every bit of emotion and or your breathing, your clothing, everything in between had an effect on how you would interact with that horse. And then of course you sort of put that in the context of the workplace, whether that was a meeting you were attending or whether it was a client that you were approaching or the like. And very, very interesting. And I've told the story 1,000 times since. Yeah,
look, mate, your experience is very, not uncommon in terms of the equine program that we run. The horsepower side of it is it's a massive anchor for people. Everybody that I've spoken to that's been on the course will always remember something in there. It's very special. You're getting out the classroom and you get in a unique environment for a start with an amazing creature. And a lot of people have fear around them, and that's okay because we have a lot of fear, as you said, maybe in a big meeting or doing a public speaking event or running a toolbox meeting. Or leading for the first time. One of the big things in construction is going from, a tradesperson into a leading hand. It's one of the scariest moves for people because, they're leaving their mates, so to speak, and now they've got to be responsible for their performance.
Yeah.
So a lot of those experiences that you experience with the horses are transferable. That's why we do it, because it's so transferable. It's so easy to link it back to, okay, here's an example. I had a fellow that said, look, I had a really bad experience with a horse when I was young. I said, okay, tell me what happened. He got thrown from the horse, and then his dad sort of said, get up and go and get the horse. And he was really scared and didn't get sort of tended to. I said, okay. So I said, have you had any scary experiences with human beings before? Have you ever, had an argument or, negative emotion? He said, yeah, I have. I said, well, what did you do there to recover? He said, well, I sort of focused and watched, looked for positive people, and then, reflected and found a way to sort of either, fix up the relationship or avoid those types of people or whatever it was. I said, well, okay, well, the answer's in there somewhere. It's in you. What I can do from the outside of the round yard is I can observe your body language, and I can give you some coaching around relax your shoulders, relax your muscles, breathe deeply. The rest of it, you've got to find the answer.
Yeah.
The amazing thing, Gary, is everybody finds something.
Right.
In that moment. So, yeah, and that's why it's so effective, and that's why it's really popular. A mining company I've been with for 12 years now, it's their favourite program that people talk about throughout the company, and they've got, I don't know, about 6,000 employees in Australia.
Wow, terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific. And Stuart, the thing that I'd really like to sort of have a quick chat about today is an observation I've had, and I don't know whether it's right or wrong, but I've learnt that in a lot of organisations that I've worked with over the years, you mentioned that there's the opportunity for a leading hand to grow into a more senior position, or moving into a leading role, but a lot of organisations use terms such as the ELT, the executive leadership team, and the leadership group, and all that kind of stuff. But I quite often would sit in not only some senior meetings with the leaders of the business, but I would also think to myself, what's made these people? How's this tag leader been provided to this person? Is it because they've been here the longest? Is it because their job description says that they're in a leadership style role? But the cynicism of me comes out and says, well, what do they know about leadership? Other than trial and error, have they perhaps had any formal training? Have they given it any thought? Have they ever read a book on it? Yet we all go, oh yeah, he's part of the ELT, and it sort of rubs off a little bit funny with me sometimes, because I think, you can be in the leadership group, but are you a leader, and do you know what leading is about? And of course, that's where someone of your expertise comes in and can provide the right structure, tools, and training around it. But what are your thoughts there? I mean, you see that regularly, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it comes down to, what's the definition of a leader? And, there's many definitions out there, and there's all truths in all of them. But essentially, my view on leadership is it's a behaviour. Leader, if you demonstrate authentic behaviour with integrity, you'll have people that want to be around you and feel safe around you. It's that sort of creating that psychological safety, if you want, and tapping into people's potential. So there's a book I read years ago by Joseph Jaworski called Synchronicity. And, in there it gave me, and this was 20 years ago I read this, the concept of servant leadership. So essentially, leadership is not about the people below us serving us. It's the other, it's inverse.
Absolutely.
It's we serve them.
Absolutely.
We set the conditions to enable them to be successful. Now, if somebody is demonstrating those behaviours, how are you going to feel towards them?
Absolutely. I recall you using the whole Shackleton experience, Ernest Shackleton, as a case study, and that was exceptional. That was, and you remind me of that because you talk about, he was almost in a following role, and serving his crew, as opposed to being the guy at the front of the boat beating his chest.
Yeah, in that moment, Gary. Since then, I've found out other things about Shackleton that aren't so glamorous.
Share them.
Yeah. Well, look. I mean, the point with Shackleton, he had a massive ego, and he'd done many failed expeditions. And he was a womanizer, a drunk, all those things in the back, but we didn't know that. And he managed to get this money by hook or by crook.
Yeah.
and wasn't necessarily a man of integrity in the leader. But when push came to shove, the best part of his leadership came out,
Right.
which was he was all about getting every single man across the ice and alive. And, you know, to that, you can't fault him. You know, his decision making going up to there, you could definitely pick that apart.
Right.
All right. But essentially, once they were on the ice, he kept those guys alive and he got them off after 2 years living in Antarctica. And you imagine, I mean, we're talking this day and age, you and I would struggle living 2 weeks there with Gore-Tex, all the down jackets, all that sort of stuff. They had cotton windproofs and woolen jumpers.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? And so a hardy lot. So very good in that crisis situation. He sort of like came to the fore. But there's other sides to his leadership. And I didn't know that back then because I was going off of the book South and, you know, picking out all the great things that the author picked out about him.
Of course.
But, you know, it was good because what we actually did for there, we watched that film, didn't we, in the beginning? And we said, okay, now what we want you to do is this group, we want you to elect what are the outstanding, you know, values and behaviours that you want to see in this team. And what you're going to do is you're going to assess each other at the end of each module that we do. And at the end, you get awarded the Shackleton Award, which was a compass, which is what you got awarded, right?
I've still got it. Got it.
Well, and so what does that, I mean, look, the compass, just a little brass compass and stuff, but what does it represent to you?
Oh, look, to be brutally honest, it makes me think of the experience that we went through as a group. And we did lots of different things, as you know. We did the equine, we did abseiling, we did caving, we did the whole thing. And I don't want to spoil it for any organisations that might be about to go through your program. But the compass itself, to me, I reflect on it and I think about every one of the participants in the group. I think about the challenges that we had, good, bad, and ugly, and then of course, you know, at the end of the course, it was just a really, really nice moment for us to all celebrate the end of the course and the learnings that we all achieved. It was unanimous, obviously, that it was a success.
Yeah, it was fantastic. There was massive engagement from the company. So from the CEO all the way through the executive leadership, there was always representation from them. And that's the critical thing around leadership programs. If there's no engagement from the senior leaders or the executive, you're pushing everything uphill. Yeah. And it's very hard to, you talk about those first-time leaders, going into leading hand or supervisory roles, those sorts of things. If the executives and the senior leaders aren't demonstrating that and aren't advocating that as well, it's a very hard ceiling, a very low ceiling that they bump into.
Yeah.
So that was one of the successes of that program was their engagement, the executive engagement, and the championing of that.
Yeah.
And of course, what you guys created, and we create that through experience. It was designed purposely to be a nice combination of theory and experiences. And as you say, that time we went up the mountains and we were over this amazing valley, 300 meters up in the air. There was fear going on, but everybody got around each other, and we had women and men on there, and we all played a role in making sure that everybody achieved what we wanted to achieve in their way. So we tapped into their potential, and you guys sort of said, well, okay, what are you willing to do? Where do you think you can go? You don't think you can do that 300-meter abseil? Okay, what can you do? And you found a role for them. And that to me is leadership. It's really around finding a role for everybody, tapping into their strengths and, looking for areas to develop. And I think that was the beauty of that particular group, is you were very, very supportive of each other.
So Stu, in regard to construction now, how do you see from where you sit in terms of the challenges? I think you understand construction very well and mining well enough to understand that, it's cutthroat, it is high pressure, it's time, cost, quality, safety, everything all bundled into one. So for the senior sort of people in businesses out there, when we think about leadership, what opportunities do you think construction has right now in terms of leadership and development?
Well, I actually think they just got to invest in it, to be quite honest. Some companies do. And when they do, they've got to look at it from a top down, or I call it the pincer movement. You can do top down and bottom up approach. Because what you want cascading leadership through the company. You want a leadership culture. So I actually don't believe in culture change programs. I believe in leadership programs, because leadership is the culture that you want to create. And so it's got to be cascading. Everybody's got to participate. Because you're in the executive per se, you can't be immune from developing or being on the journey. You have a different level of sophistication in there, which I think is really relevant. But we want to set everybody up for success, and therefore we need to develop a language of leadership, and it's a common language of leadership. And that's why I take a systemic approach to leadership, is that everybody's talking off the same hymn sheet. All right, and that is critical. So for me, the systemic approach is, and in life as well, we can use the same approach. Life and work's the same. We ask ourselves 3 questions. What are we trying to achieve, and why is the first question. We've got to get clarity on that. And then, what's the current situation? Okay, what's the current situation? What's working well and what's not working so well? And it's important that we go to the good stuff first, because it gets our brain in a positive space. And then the last one is, okay, what's the plan? What are we going to do? Right, in order to solve this, or in order to achieve the W1. So there's those 3 questions, and I use those questions with my kids, and my kids are 9 and 6. And they, you can see them thinking about it, and they're even using it in their language. And I was blown away by my son on the weekend, where I said, "What are you up to?" And he's got a little cupboard where all his clothes are hanging up and stuff like that. And he said, Dad, I want to be a YouTuber, so I've made this editing suite. I was like, oh, okay, it's like, great. Not a real career, but anyway. But I went along with it, because it's his creativity that I was really curious about. And when I went in there, he had his desk all organized, but he had a vision board up where he had everything what he wanted to achieve up on there. And I was absolutely blown away by the level of detail and what he thought about, and the creativity that he'd come up with. And we had a great conversation about that. So there's that. The second thing is all leaders are responsible for creating the conditions for their teams to be successful, and contributing to the organization and contributing to themselves, right? And these 3 conditions are clarity, all right? So what is the purpose? What is the vision? What are the values that we're operating under? That's an example of clarity, roles, responsibilities. The second is the climate. And the climate is impacted by a couple of things. It's the culture within the team, all right? But also our systems and processes, and some of the hard stuff that we got, so like hardware, etc. So you imagine if you're on site and you haven't got Wi-Fi reception. Well, how's that going to impact you? And it impacts the climate in that way. And the third thing that we've got to be responsible for is the competence. And that's both the knowledge and skills. So if you've got a first-year apprentice, well, what you've got to do is you've got to coach them and mentor them and guide them and instruct them into building their skills, their knowledge and skill, in terms of if they're a carpenter or electrician, whatever it is. But the other side of that is the behaviour and attitude. And quite often we fall into the trap of hiring people on their knowledge and skill. We get the smartest person we can, but their behaviour and attitude is not one that's conducive to a good climate or a good culture. So we hire them, in those instances, we might hire them on knowledge and skill, and we fire them on behaviour and attitude.
That's
whereas, I've just had a great conversation last week with a guy, a supervisor in mining out in Mount Isa. And he was talking to me about this young fellow. He's 21 years old. And he's been a bit of a rack bag in the past, and he's made a few errors. But what he spotted in him is the behaviour and attitude. This guy is motivated. He's keen to learn, all right? And he's young. He has made mistakes, but he's humble with that, and he's contrite, and he sort of says, sorry, I really want to be better. So he's coachable. This person's, he's gold. And, so this guy, this supervisor is teaching him everything he knows, and he's having regular sit-down conversations with him about, the right behaviours and attitude, what he's doing really well, where can he improve. And this kid is blossoming. He's flourishing under this.
That's fantastic. Stu, look, I'm mindful of time, and before we wrap up, I just wanted to anyone that may be listening to this that is interested in any of your programs, and in particular the equine program, perhaps, where can they reach out to you?
I'll go on the website leadershiphorsepower.com. And then all the details are on there. So if you just search there, I'm in LinkedIn and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm not massive on the social media. I'm trying to get better, but that's the I think the generation. But I do love some of the things that are achievable. I love watching your podcast, for example. There's been some great ones. So
thank you very much. Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. I hope we got enough of the key points out there for the listeners today to really understand, particularly around the equine and some of the offerings of your programs. But thank you so much, Stu, for coming on board. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'd love to catch up and have a cup of tea with you sometime when I'm up at your neck of the woods. And I believe I believe the football's on tonight, so we won't even touch that,
eh? Yeah. Look, I did live in New South Wales for a long time, but because my kids are now Queenslanders, I've had to. Yeah, I'm sorry, but look, I think it'll be an interesting match. It'll be great matchup tonight.
All right, mate. Well, look, thanks so much again, Stu. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on board, and I'd love to catch up soon.
Yeah, we will, Gary, for sure. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, mate.
See ya.
Bye-bye. Hey, thank you, Stuart Harrison, for coming in and have a chat with us today. I hope our listeners enjoyed it today, and particularly took something away around the fact that we use building relationships with humans and horses and how that can help us in our leadership and learning. Anyway, thanks so much. Please like and share, and we'll catch you really soon. Cheers.